How's everyone doing? So, as we all know, 2020 is an election year. Easy to forget about that with all the COVID craziness. Believe me, I get that. But it is an election year. In November, we will be voting for the President of the United States between incumbent Donald Trump and Democratic challenger, former Vice President Joe Biden. And the only thing that matters is who gets those 270 electoral votes. I'm sure you've heard a lot about the Electoral College, especially in 2016. After Donald Trump won the Electoral College without winning the popular vote. And people are wondering, how could he be president then? Well, rather easily, he won the Electoral College. And, I'm sure we've heard the term Electoral College thrown a lot. We all know somewhat at least what it is. A lot of people haven't totally been taught about the Electoral College, why it was invented, history of it, why we still use it today, its importance. So that's what I'm going to go into today. Start with some background. The Electoral College was created by the founding fathers of the United States when derived from the Constitution, and particularly Alexander Hamilton, who wanted it. And the primary purpose was to protect the minority from the tyranny of the majority, especially at the time when there were only 13 states, in which the larger states, of course, exercise much more power than they do now. They still do exercise more power, but at the time, the larger states could easily band together and exercise their will over the smaller states due to, a smaller country. It was to ensure that each state's voice would get heard. And also, especially back then, when less people were educated, the electors, in theory, were more educated, higher educated than the common people, and they would make a more informed decision for president. Another big purpose of it was to try to act as a safeguard against an incompetent president. Try to help, like I said, especially back then when people were in general perceived to be less educated, it's perceived that thought that the electors who were thought to be higher educated would make a better decision and stop someone incompetent or tyrannical from taking office. Now, that purpose has kind of been diluted over time as more and more states have passed laws binding their electors, forcing them to go with the popular vote, and if they don't, they just get replaced with someone else. So which has become a bit of an issue and sort of losing its original intent. That being said, some states still do allow faithless electors, and actually in the last election there was a pretty decent movement going on called the Hamilton electors, particularly within the Republican Party, to try and stop Donald Trump from taking office. Obviously it did not work, but it was a pretty solid movement they had going for what it was. Well, a major reason for the Electoral College today is to ensure that presidential candidates focus on more than just the large states, more than just these big coastal cities. It is to ensure they go to the smaller states, that they care about the smaller states, that they try to appeal to multiple demographics and types of voters. So they can't just only go for one region of the country, only go for one demographic of voter, only go for certain cities, certain states. Is to ensure that each state gets their voice heard by a candidate. And so he or she can care about these issues, that they should care about these issues, so that Joe in California doesn't matter any more than Laura in Wyoming. Another big reason that it still exists is because, we are not a democracy, and a constant criticism of the Electoral College is it's not democratic. How is this not democratic if we don't technically pick the president? Well, the United States was never intended to be a democracy. The founders studied democracy, ancient Greek democracy, and that didn't work. That, again, the majority could reign tyranny on the minority. They could take away the rights of the minority. The classic example being two wolves and a sheep voting on what to eat for dinner. The two wolves vote to eat sheep for dinner. It doesn't matter what the sheep wants, he's outnumbered. So we are not a democracy, we are a republic, and it is meant for that exact reason. So the electors themselves, we don't know a whole lot about them, who they are, how they're chosen. That's partially because it's never given much thought. They're typically chosen in state elections, and the requirements aren't that strict across the board. The main requirements are really just that you're of voting age and you are not currently holding any public office. Another purpose of the Electoral College is to decentralize control of the election. We are a collection of 50 states, and state sovereignty is an important ideal in the United States. Each state has their own electoral code, their own way of doing things, own laws, own culture. Even within states, there's so many different demographics, backgrounds, cultures of people, and it is important that each state preserves their own identity, including in these national elections. The reason we do this also is just it goes in with the American ideal of separation of power. The same reason that we have 3 branches of government, executive, legislative, judiciary, why there's 2 chambers of Congress, and why each state's appointed 2 senators and representatives based on population. Why, to amend the Constitution, it takes a supermajority, 2/3 of Congress, and 3/4 of the states to amend it. It is deliberately difficult to amend the Constitution. Now, going to some prior elections, such as this past election where Donald Trump won despite losing the popular vote, he did not win the national popular vote. That is correct. However, he did win the popular vote in more key states than Hillary Clinton did. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote in large part due to the large deep blue states of California and New York. So while she did win the national popular vote, she did not win enough popular votes in enough states, to where Donald Trump won more popular vote, and especially the key states such as Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, which were, while they've always been sort of swing states, they were overall considered safe by Democrats for the most part. Which brings me to my next point of another criticism of the Electoral College, saying, well, even then with these electors saying it's supposed to protect the states, doesn't that still make only swing states matter? Not entirely. The fact of the matter is swing and safe states change over time. California, now a deep blue state, voted consistently red as recently as 1988. Texas, a deep red state, used to vote Democratic pretty much all the time until really Reagan's first election. And people talk about George W. Bush. That is perhaps the most controversial election within the last 50 years, where George W. Bush won an incredibly close election, rather controversially with a questionable Florida recount. And people say, oh, he won because of Florida. He lost the electoral vote. Florida is what gave Bush the presidency. Yes and no. A big reason he won, which no one talks about, is he won West Virginia. He flipped West Virginia red, which at the time was considered a very safe Democratic state. And nowadays, West Virginia is a very deep red state. Donald Trump won an overwhelmingly majority of the vote in West Virginia. So, like I said, safe and swing states change over time. Saying only swing states matter is not necessarily a fair criticism. So, just to recap, the Electoral College was created to protect the minority against the majority. It was created to act as a buffer against an incompetent president. Is created to preserve state sovereignty, and was to ensure that candidates care about the majority of the country, the majority of the states. They focus on the little states, the flyover states like Montana and Idaho. They do not just focus on high population centers or just certain regions of the country, such as the Southeast, West Coast, Northeast, etc. Hope you found this helpful, and if there's anything else you'd like to know, reach out to me, do your own research, just let me know.